Hi, everybody. This is Janet Belsky, and I am on to episode 4 of Big Questions in Being Human. And today we're going to talk about that most fascinating, compelling topic called sex differences. What really are the differences between women and men in their personalities and their attitudes and the way they think about life? Okay, so here we see the lifespan. We see women, we see babies, we see men. What really are the differences here in how we travel through life? Okay, so let me go on by giving you a quiz, as I usually do. You might want to get your pencils ready and answer these questions, and then you can see whether you're right or not at the end of my talk. Are men more active and object oriented? Well, we certainly expect the men run around and they're interested in things. Absolutely should be true. Are men more competitive? Of course they should be. Men are, well, we fight, then we send men to war. Men have to be more competitive than women. Are men more intelligent? Well, throughout history, everybody thought that that was the case, and we're going to look at whether that's really true or not. Are men free to do what they want? Well, theoretically, absolutely. The women have to tethered to the kids. The men can go around and do whatever they want. Are men more interested in casual sex and one night stands? That's part of our stereotype too. Men are interested in just having sex, and women don't like one night stands. They want a commitment from a man. Are men the pursuers? That's also part of our stereotype. Men are chasing women. Men chase women, and women sit there and let themselves be chased by the men. Now we come to women. Are women more empathic? And people are, well, that's absolutely what we expect from women. That is core of our stereotype about women. We're the empathy people. We're the feelings people. Are women more collaborative? Yeah, we don't like to fight. We like to work with each other. We like to talk with each other. We like to reach common ground. Men are not as interested in that stuff as women. Are women more passive? Well, that's the stereotype too. I mean, we are, we're the sort of dependent, passive sex. And of course, we're dependent. Women are dependent on men. How many of these are absolutely true or not? Good, which I almost forgot. Who needs the other sex more, women or men? Lesson plan. First, we're going to look at evolution, what that says about men and women, and we're going to look through history, all in about 5 minutes. Then we're going to look at babies, the differences between boy and girl babies, boys and girls. We're going to go to teenagers, men and women, and then I'm going to do a little bit more of talking about widowhood because that is the classic event at my age, which I'm in my late 70s, is that you lose your spouse. How do men and women adjust to widowhood? Here's a summary of evolution. According to Darwin, sexual reproduction is the basic life force that allows us to evolve as a species. And a division of labor occurs from swans to swallows to seals to human beings. Females devote their effort to raising the offspring, and males are competing to put their seed in the female. Therefore, the evolutionary purpose of men is to fight for status and to widely spread their genes. Women, we like security. That's what we want in life. And we want to choose the best possible mate, the mate that can give us security, which is going to be the most dominant mate, the one that can really take care of us the best. And it could be the richest mate, it could, depending on your feelings, it could be the most powerful mate. Big, strong men are what appeal to us women, don't we? But according to Darwin, in the few species when men's share the parenting, the sex differences are less intense. This, and actually, women and men are much more alike. throughout human history. It depends on the culture. So there are some cultures where women and men are absolutely equal. And one of them, classic, stood out was the pioneers. Life was hard. They had to absolutely do the same jobs. There was no division of labor. And they both cleared the forest and they brought up the kids. And that was a harsh society where they needed to be equal. Here's the Victorian age, and here we have the epitome of the passive dependent woman. At that point, England was the ruler of the world, went out and colonized all these countries. And women, we're talking now, of course, about upper middle class women. We're talking about rich women, because the poor women always had to work. Rich women could just sit back and be taken care of for their whole lives. And Islam, particularly the Wahhabis, which is the most conservative aspect of Islam, the women had to be covered. That's the burqa. The men were in charge of everything. In the Wahhabi religion, men could decide who was to divorce a woman. Women couldn't decide divorce. Men could decide whether their wives would work or not. Men had control over everything in women's lives. Very recently in Saudi Arabia, they passed a law where women were finally allowed to drive. I'm doing finally here. And I think this is an important framework for what we're going to be talking about now. After the men returned from the Second World War, the gender roles reasserted themselves full force. Women had to be in the kitchen. They were not allowed to work after they got married. They were looked down on for working. And the men took care of the finances completely until my generation became teenagers. I'm a baby boomer. And we looked around and we saw all sorts of abuse, which I saw. I was growing up. I used to see men, they asserted their control over the women, and the women were absolutely helpless. You know, if you got a divorce, you were in bad shape. So we decided that we were going to rebel against this, and that's the famous women's movement, starting really in the 60s, gathering steam in the late 60s. And we said, we cannot be under the thumb of a man. We're going to work. We are equal to men. We can do everything men would do. This is the first time in history that we've explicitly spelled out the fact that men and women are absolutely equal in their talents and what they can do. So that's a landmark in human history, the women's movement. Okay, so what makes us biologically behave as female or male? Taking a look inside the body. It looks like, you know, men have an XY chromosome and women have the XX. The Y chromosome is what causes you to develop a penis, which that happens in the first trimester, very, very early in development. And the penis is secreting this wonderful thing, which is a very, very important hormone called testosterone. That happens prenatally. And then the testosterone level kind of goes into, I would say, kind of a hibernation. And then at puberty, it explodes again. And at puberty, men have somewhere about 8 times the testosterone of women. Now, let me talk to you about females and testosterone. Women have testosterone too, we do, but we have less. And testosterone is the sex hormone in both men and women. That's very important. So sex and aggression, absolutely connected. They're connected by this incredible hormone called testosterone. Look at the differences here at puberty. Here, elementary school kids, they look basically the same. They look almost the same. By the time you hit puberty, there's such a huge difference. We all know, of course, between women and men in the way they look and in literally in testosterone production and all sorts of other things. Here we have a bell-shaped curve. And what I mean by that is that there's so much overlap in all these qualities. But statistically speaking, In baby boys, they're going to look and relate more to the outside world starting very, very early on. Here we have a little boy, and it would not be a little girl doing this kind of thing. Everybody looks at faces more than anything. That's what the most interesting part of the environment to us as babies and when we're adults. I mean, who's interested in, the sort of the contours of your apartment? What you're interested in is talking to people and looking at faces. But boys, a little more interested in objects starting early on. They're a little bit more interested in the physical outside world. Boys walk sooner. Girls, not telling you anything you didn't know, actually talk sooner. But look at the overlap here. There's really so much overlap between boys and girls. This is the number of words produced. And we see that girls are a little bit better than boys, but there's still a lot of boys that are really good. Looking at the bottom chart, I'm not looking at this one here. This is words produced at 26 months, which would be at around age 2. And once again, we see women doing better than men. Very slight statistical differences. I mean, infancy, they're basically just alike, but there are slight differences between women and men in these particular areas. Girls talk sooner, and there's a big difference in anybody who's had a kid knows that boys are much more physically active, starting in the toddler years and continuing on. Around 3, the sexes separate into different societies. It doesn't happen in infancy. You can have a best friend who's 1 if you're a boy, who's a girl, but starting about 3, you begin to sort of, you want to be with your own sex. They play with different toys. We know that. Boys play with the object toys. Girls play with the dolls. Now, an action figure is actually a doll, but you treat that in a different way. The girls kind of play with the dress-up dolls. That's a standard thing. Can we change that pattern? You try in preschool, but basically, and we see some differences, particularly in the object thing with girls, but basically, you can't ignore that there is a gender split going on. And there's a gender split in the way boys and girls act. Girls are giggling and they're with each other and they're acting girlish, right? And there are 2 of them as opposed to boys who get together in these big groups and they basically fight with each other. I mean, they may hug each other, but it's more of a fighting hug. But look at these girls. These girls are loving, bonding in a very, very different way. And once you understand that you are a girl, which can be kind of a difficult proposition to understand what the real difference is, and your mission is to imitate and compete with your own sex. So here we see the guys competing at running around, kicking the ball, see who can be fastest. And here we see the little girl, doing her gender type behavior, putting on makeup. She's encouraged to do that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, which is the essence of boy bonding behavior, which goes by a wonderful name called rough and tumble play. Basically, that's play fighting. Play fighting is standard in male primates. Second thing is that it demands an interesting set of skills. One thing is you need to fight, but you also need to know when to back off. Demands really good interpersonal skills, basically looking at facial cues. It's perfect preparation for male bonding as adults. And women, they don't get that kind of male bonding at all. Women get very upset, and all you have to do is visit a preschool when they see the boys fighting. Hey, stop fighting. That's bad. Now, what they don't understand is that that's really the mechanism by which these guys are learning to get along. One of the things that I like to do, and I think many of my own gender like to do, is we like to share secrets. So if somebody tells me nowadays, which they did, you're the only person I'm telling this to, this happened to me here, all of a sudden they became my best friend. It's like we understand each other and nobody else understands us. What we want to do is talk about relationships. We want to talk about relationships with our friends. We want to talk about relationships with our spouse, but we're interested in talking about people. That's our thing. And unfortunately, starting out very early on, all of you guys can relate to this. We're interested in gossiping and excluding people we don't like. And that's called relational aggression. So, for instance, here's two little girls sharing secrets, and they're so thrilled and they're so happy about that. Two other little girls, a little older, excluding somebody. Okay, now this is not a nice thing, but it's really basic to female bonding behavior. And of course, the classic thing is they're in a clique, and that's female aggression. Our aggression is talking about other people. But what about parents? Do they act in gender type ways? And the answer is, of course they do. Fathers throw their sons in the air and they encourage rough and tumble play. So dads are much more arousing and they're much more fun. Moms are more gentle. So that's this classic gender difference. Okay, so then I'm thinking to myself and I'm saying, now wait a second. My father was teaching me to be a girl in the way that he acted to me. And I don't know how powerful that is, but I know in my life, my father saw me as a little princess. He treated me as a little girl. And I think that added to the impulse that I had to want to act like a little girl. I was not a tomboy. A tomboy, by the way, is a good thing, but I wanted to be a little girl very, very much. Both biology and on-the-job training cement sex differences well before adolescence. Okay, and these are some fun facts. Girls reach puberty about 1 year earlier, but it looks like girls are 2 years ahead because the female externals happen first. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is puberty goes through a sequence. The breasts are one of the first things that begin to develop in a girl. The penis is one of the first things that develops in a boy. Now, you can't see the penis, but you can see the breasts. So girls really look like women well before boys look like men, or I should say 2 years ahead. Look at any sixth grade class. You can see that in operation, and fifth grade class now. Setting us up for the classic difference. Women choose older men. In my case, it would be, reach puberty when I was in fifth grade, which I did. It was looking to the sixth and seventh grade boys as the most exciting. And the fact of the matter is, I reached puberty early. I got my period at age 10, which is very early, even today. And I was having a wonderful time because for the first time, I was really popular with the older boys being in eighth grade. I could have gotten pregnant. Luckily, I didn't. I escaped that, but I got into a lot of trouble because I'm going to start a smoke, sneak out of the house. Oh, it was so exciting because I was also an early maturing girl. Obviously, when you're a teenager and in your whole life, having a good body and feeling good about your body is critical. But classically, and this is sort of a no-brainer, boys are interested in building up their muscles, and girls in Western society, this is a big caveat, because in other cultures, it's in cultures where they don't have enough food, the attractive women are the heavy women, but in our society, the thin women, you cannot be too thin or too rich. That was a classic. The thin women got the goods. And unfortunately, that brings us to eating disorders, which are the female disease of teenagers in particular. Really, they start to really develop in adolescence. Anorexia and bulimia. Those are adolescent issues, mainly female. Now we imagine boys are pursuing girls, right? But actually, when we think about it more deeply, who is really pursuing who? I'm going to give you an example from my place here. I was talking to a guy, and He said, well, I said, well, you're not really talking to me. He said, but you're not interested in me because you didn't give off signals that you like me. The women are giving off the signals to the men that they want to, that they particularly like the men. We have data on this at every stage of life. This woman is probably saying to this guy, maybe it's more than just teaching me about tennis. Maybe I'm interested in you. And he can see it, he can visually see it, and we'll see what happens in that relationship there. Here are scientific answers to your questions about sex. Are men more likely to have affairs and be interested in casual sex? Interestingly, the data on affairs is more equal. Women have affairs too, but the casual sex data, no contest. Men are much more interested in having one night stands and casual sex. And of course, this is enshrined in the idea the women who do that are sluts, and men who do that are studs. Are men much more interested in looks and women in status? And I think there too, we would say yes, the men are more interested in looks. What captivates them visually is the way a woman looks first. And women, some women are interested in the way a guy looks, but I think, let's think about it, women. I think basically what we're really interested in is powerful men. We're interested in having, well, however we define status, we're interested, we're attracted to powerful men. For instance, I don't care the way somebody looks. What I care about is their attitude, the way they come across to me. I care about whether they're self-confident, those kinds of things. Men, looks wise, have specific things that attract them in women. And interestingly, biologically, what tends to attract men and women is young women, that we knew. Men get attracted to the young women in their 20s. Some of the data is they're attracted to firm breasts. It's an interesting finding from my point of view. A firm body, because what that signals evolution-wise is this is a really healthy woman, and that's who I want to plant my seed in here. So it's young women, it's healthy women, women with firm bodies, which is not women my age, unfortunately. With regard to infidelity and jealousy, are there sex differences in what upsets females and males most? This one I thought was incredibly interesting, and I think there's a lot of reality to it. It looks like men get crazy when their partner has sex with somebody else, because then they become, quote, a cuckold. Then they're being cuckolded, and a man's putting his seed into my woman. Jealousy is most intense in women if their partner develops a relationship with another woman. Interesting difference relating to evolution there. Here are scientific answers to my most captivating questions about career and housework and parenting. As we all know, or many of us know, today women are more well-educated. Women are really much better in school. They sit still. School is good for women. We have almost a 60-40 split between women and men in terms of getting in being enrolled in college. Women go to college more often and or graduate school. It used to be, even in 1997, that basically both genders cared about having a high-paying profession, or very important. Now it looks like women are more interested in having a high-paying profession than men. In other words, the work aspect of life, or being interested in making money, is maybe more important to women than men. Put this in your thinking caps. Women have become more career-oriented than men in today's world. It's gotten a little bit more equal, but there's still differences. Women's earnings as a percent of men. Women are still earning overall about 80% of men's salaries. Decoding this, women are in professions that don't pay well. Teaching pays very badly, and the male professions, even construction work, pays better. And certainly the tech industry, I mean, those are high paying jobs. There's no comparison between being a social worker, as everybody knows, being a teacher, and being in that industry. Even, and most people are working full time, even in people that work, couples that work full time, women are still doing most of the housework and childcare. So women are actually doing double duty, and that was a big, big reason for divorce in the past. Before we leave, I have to tell you that we still feel statistically that caring for the kids is our primary role. And we saw this during the pandemic. Women were more likely to give up their jobs than the men. Okay, and this is what got me interested in this whole topic. I noticed to myself that when the men talk and the men act, we're going to start with acting. Men act different than women, obviously, throughout life. And we're going to start out by, again, saying that women actually have a lot more freedom to enter typically male roles. So, I mean, a standard one, of course, is sports. I mean, we love it when women are interested in sports. I mean, that's wonderful. This woman really gets where I am, and I love it. And I think we're going to participate in watching the game together every Saturday. But men, suppose you were interested in putting makeup on, going with the girls. If we had a male who wanted to enter that role, what would we say? Well, what he would really say is he's gay. And that's where a lot of the difference is. You know, if men do the female thing, we automatically assume that they're gay, and we kind of look down on that, let's be honest. So how do they talk? I've been doing a little participant observation in my place. The men, when they're not in a relationship in my place, they sit together in men's groups, and all you have to do is you have to go to, local restaurant with the older men are sitting together typically, and the women are sitting in their group together. Well, the content is a little different. Men are typically, what they're interested in is they discuss politics, and they discuss sports, of course, that's very interesting, and they brag about the kids. Now, what they're not talking about is anything to do with relationships. They're discussing their own interests. And I've noticed, and I've been listening in on men, not just in my place, but in other places, that men like to challenge each other. Now, they're talking and they're having a great time, but they're actually competing. Look at these guys challenging each other, making fun of each other, and they're making up games, which is what they do sometimes. Women are not, we don't get together, we're not interested in making up games. What we're interested in is sharing our feelings and gossiping. We don't want to do it. I mean, but it kind of takes us over. So, but let's get back to sports, okay, and politics. If women are discussing those things, and I certainly discuss politics with my women friends, if somebody is very different than me politically, I am not going to talk. In other words, if they're a Trump supporter, I'm not going to touch it because I don't want to start arguing with them. So we'll go off, that's off topic. We're not going to talk about a topic where we're going to fight. We're going to agree with each other as best we can. And we're going to share our feelings about things, and we're going to gossip. What happens at my place is really interesting. It's like you start out talking about your feelings and what happened today and on and on. And then the temptation to gossip about the people in the place is overwhelming. And you try valiantly not to do that because you say to yourself, if I'm gossiping about this person, they're going to start gossiping about me. But sometimes you just can't help yourself. It's very alluring to us to gossip. As we get to the second half of life, adult life, the classic idea is that women become more assertive and dominant, classically male-like. Classic studies confirm that idea. Now, I don't know how true that is today, but the whole idea is that women become more dominant when they get older. And you can tell me if that fits in with your own perceptions. Just think about it. What happens sexual performance-wise to older men? I can give you unvarnished talk about that, but I'm not going to do it right now. I can talk to you about, obviously, men have a harder time getting an erection. They have a harder time getting an orgasm. That's upsetting for men, but that is a classic. And we can talk later exactly about why that is. Okay, but what I am going to talk about is that classic event at my age, which is widowhood. And here are the facts. By the late 80s, there are almost 3 women for every man. Gets to be 50-50 around the 40s, and then more men die. We saw this in physical aging of every, particularly of heart attacks, but men are really more fragile physically than women. They tend to die off earlier. We know that. And there are almost 3 women to every man by the late 80s. And as we know, men prefer younger women. By later life, the statistical age gap for marriage, when you get married, is going to be about 15 years. You know, a common scenario, you have the 50-year-old woman with a 75-year-old man, perfectly fine. Now, if she's 20 and he's 80, there could be a problem, but 15 years, not so bad. Therefore, women, because they're likely to be widows, can expect to live their last years of life alone unless they move in with their kids or into other arrangements. Many women are living alone. But most women say they're not interested in finding a new mate. I have my friends and family. Why would I want to care for another man? And the best predictor of a widow's satisfaction is finding a new female friend. Friends in later life are central, particularly for women. They become more important when you lose a spouse, and then you bond with your female friends. But this isn't true of men, and they want, and typically, remember we talk, they're not talking about feelings. They're really more distant in their relationships with the other men. They're talking about things. They typically find a new partner, and they are right, a finding demonstrated by what's called the widowhood mortality effect. Okay, so here we have a chart. It shows us that both men and women are slightly more likely to die after a spouse dies. But the men, this is the steady line, have an elevated risk of dying compared to the women. The women are likely, and this happens during the first 2 or 3 years after they've lost a spouse. Many reasons why that is. Of course, one of the main reasons is that the wife is taking care of the man's health. Not only is he more depressed, very depressed, because that's his only relationship, but the woman has been really caring for him physically. And while males commit suicide much more often than women during the last half of life, men over 85 have the highest suicide rates of any age group because they have no spouse, they have no contacts, they've been retired, and basically it's very hard for men to live by themselves. 55 to 64, here's the women, 6.2, 29.6. I mean, these are all small numbers, but the bottom line is men are 3 times as likely to kill themselves. Now, yes, it's better for females to have a loving mate, a male, could be a male, but as they get older, and maybe before, women can be life-saving for men. So do men need women more than men, more than women need men? The answer, from my humble point of view, is men need women more than women need men. Men need women to care for them as their emotional anchor. Women can have other women. Men need women more, and it can be life-saving in later life, particularly. So we're back to the quiz. Are men more active and object-oriented? Those of you that said yes are absolutely right. Definitely. Starting out early. Are they more competitive? Well, women are pretty competitive. We compete over how we look. We care a lot. We compete with each other a lot, don't we, women? Let's be honest. Women are competitive too. Are men more intelligent? Not really. I mean, men are better at certain things, and women are better at other things. And if we look at things like scholarship, reading, women are more intelligent than men. So there's really a wash right going on right there. Free to do what they want? No. Women have more latitude today to do what they want than men. So the men are less free to do what they want. Interested in casual sex and one night stands? Absolutely. Men are interested in that, and women, very few women are really into having casual sex and one night stands. That is not our thing. We're interested in love. Are men the pursuers? Remember, I said women, we're sending out the signals to men. So, really, we're pursuing the men. Are women more empathic? Definitely. We are the people, and that starts out early when we begin to talk to each other and when we begin in elementary school and we're sharing secrets. We're people oriented. We're really interested in getting into other people's feelings. Collaborative? Yeah, we don't like to fight. We're much more collaborative than the men. Passive? I don't think so, at least not nowadays. Not women are not passive anymore. Dependent? Definitely no today. Let me make an editorial comment here. I think part of much of what's going on today with the Trump renaissance has to do with women, with the fact that men have lost their role as the dominant protectors, and women have moved into that role. So you see things like, let's bring women back into the kitchen. Men are reasserting their role, and many of them hope to have a strong person that's going to really bring them back to that traditional classic male role, which is we've had for millennia and we do not have anymore. Some things have changed, but now I'm going to tell you that actually men and women are just the same because we have the same priorities in life and we have the same agendas in life. And the mission of both men and women is to be caring. And I'm not saying men are just as caring as women, but they're caring in a different way. They're taking care of the women. They're changing the tires. Their way of caring, they're supporting the family. Men are just as caring as women in their own way. And we all want to care for the next generation, our children and grandchildren. That's our mission. Certainly my mission at my age and the mission of all the men I know is they want to care for the kids and the grandkids. Do we compete for status? Absolutely. I compete here in my place for status. Everybody's competing for status in our own way. And we're taking pride in what we've accomplished in life. That's a basic human agenda, to be proud of what you're doing in your life. And above all, our basic mission is to love and be loved. To be in a relationship, a loving relationship where you give to the other person and take from the other person. That's what we are aspiring to do. So men and women are really, really just the same in the fundamental ways. Next time, I am going to talk about to that very issue, which is relationships. We're going to talk about parents. We're going to talk about career, but we're really going to talk about relationships, which so far we have not talked about except in this particular lecture. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Belsky Being Human.